spells have been buffed and nerfed and changed significantly since launch. And if you want to shake things up and get away from those nerfs and dive right into the DLC, these are the best spells for any intelligence build. Let's go. Let me know your favorite spell in the comments down below. I've ordered these like roughly based on how early in the game you can get them. Also, I've done a video very similar to this back at launch, but I won't be covering most of those spells again, and it has changed since then because of patches. Firstly, we're going to start off with the Glintstone Arc. Now, this is a pretty cheap AoE spell that has a very low int requirement and low FP cost and a very fast cast time, and it does deal a decent amount of stagger. Like, it does stagger enemies pretty comfortably. Now, the real benefits here is that AoE potential, because a lot of spells across the board don't have that AoE potential because of how OP that would be to just be able to stand at range and like spam AoE spells. This essentially allows you to do that. It also pierces through targets, so it can hit multiple targets. It's super cheap. You can get it right at the start of the game if you're starting as the astrologer class, or you can buy it from Sorceress Sling at the Waypoint Ruins essentially as soon as you start the game as well. Next, we've got the Rock Sling. Now, this was great at launch and it's still great now. It's not as good, but it's still fantastic. Now, the reason this is great is because Rock Sling does physical damage, whereas basically every other magic spell does magic damage. So if you come across enemies that are resistant to magic and you are a full intelligence magic build, this is going to be your option that you're going to use in that fight. Now, it also does great poise damage, so it will very regularly stagger enemies if you're going to follow up with any sort of critical hits in that way. Now, the benefit of it being physical damage is it also gains buffs from any of those physical damage buffs, right? Flame Grant Me Strength or Blue Dancer Charm, any of that stuff, and it's also boosted by the Meteoric Staff as well. Funnily enough, the Arrow Talisman that increases the effective range of your bows also increases the effective range of Rock Sling for some reason. So if you want your Rock Sling to go a little bit further, you can actually do that. It does Heat Seek pretty well, especially if you've got this talisman equipped too, so you've got some benefits there. If you head to the Street of Rage's Ruins in Caelid in an underground cellar here, you'll find a chest that will contain Rock Sling for you to use. Carian Slicer is the best melee DPS spell in the game. It's not really a question. It is a very fast sweeping attack with this magical sword that does really fantastic damage, and you can get this super early in the game as well. If you wanted to have some sort of a melee focused like intelligence knight build without using a sword, but by using some sort of magical sword like this is definitely the option that you'll probably use as your main damage dealer when you're in melee range. You'll need to grab the Royal House scroll right in Limgrave on top of this little tower next to this mage. You'll be able to grab this, and then you take that to either Miralyn or to Sorceress Celine, and then you'll be able to purchase Carian Slicer from them once you have given them this scroll. Night Comet is fantastic. Now, Night Comet is potentially one of the best, like those spammable ranged spells that you'll use, like, you know, you've got Glintstone Pebble and all of those. Night Comet is probably the best option. Now, you can charge this for extra damage, right? Let's not forget that you can do that. The main benefit here is that most enemies, you know how you use any sort of spell and they will like dodge away from it. Night Comet, they do not dodge away from it, right? So they'll just like take the brunt of that damage. The second benefit is that with the Staff of Loss, you can boost its damage by like 30%, right? Now, funnily enough, if you want to use 2 Staffs of Loss, you can, because these like stack for some reason. So you can actually do that as well to get the damage even higher. And then it's just kind of hilarious because it is one of the spells that like they specifically don't dodge from this. So they just take that damage, and you know, you can sort of cheese some fights in that way. You can totally do that if you want, but it does defeat the purpose of making the game a little hard in some ways. In patch 1.07, this did actually get its FP consumption reduced, so it has actually got a buff on top of that as well. Now, to grab this, you'll need to go to Celia, the town of Sorcery. There is a tower in like the southwest-ish corner here where you'll need to light the brazier, and then it will unlock a sealed barrier in the center of the town where inside that chest you'll find Night Comet for you to grab. The Staff of Loss is also found in the same village. The Comet is the best ranged spell in terms of like damage potential once you have charged it up, and that is mostly because of the buffs it had received in patch 1.07. In 1.07, its FP cost was reduced from 26 to 24, its damage was increased, its stamina damage against guarding enemies was increased, and its stamina cost was also reduced, so it got a fair amount of buffs. And when you charge this up, it does deal a significant amount of damage. You can also pierce this through enemies as well, so if you're fighting a group of enemies or something, you've got that extra benefit because of its high damage potential. The downside is the longer cast time than most of the spells we're going to mention on this list, but its higher damage potential is why it does make this list. list, especially to the nerfs that Comet Azure has really had since launch, right? Like, obviously everyone remembers the days when we were just like spamming Comet Azure enemies and one-shotting them all, but you know, that time has passed. But Comet does deal still a fair amount of damage, and plus all of the different buffs that it got, you'll see a lot of benefits from that. Now, this isn't one that you will probably use as like your main damage dealer. You'll want to be weaving it in between other attacks, whether that be some of the spells we mentioned on this list, or you know, anything else that you personally prefer. It's not something I would say as my only spell because of that longer charge time, and because it's not as good at like heat seeking and finding targets as some of the other options even on this list. So you know, if you've got enemies that move around a lot and they dodge a lot, you'll be wasting that FP, as well as, you know, actually getting this off when you could use something else, even like Night Comet, right? You've got that benefit if you wanted to go that route. Now, to grab Comet, just before the debate parlor, there is an illusionary wall here, which I actually put a note there to let people know about right at the start of the game. So you should go and upvote that, and then destroy the wall. And once you go in there, there'll be a chest that will contain Comet. Adulas Moonblade is next. Now, this is a really good spell for a couple of reasons. It's considered a Carian sword sorcery, so you can give it buffs via the Carian Glintstone staff. It's also considered a cold sorcery, so you can give it buffs via the Snow Witch hat, which, if you know me, you know I love my cold sorceries, and this is definitely my favorite. And I do love me a good Snow Witch build, and I've actually put a new updated one with all of the nerfs, etc. recently out on the channel, which I'll link here if you wanted to go and watch that video. But in patch 1.07, this also has been buffed to increase the amount of frostbite buildup that it does do on certain types of targets that are guarding, but it also had its FP consumption reduced down to 22, which is actually probably the main benefit to this, so you can actually spam this a little bit better. Plus, if you're equipping any of like the talismans that reduce your casting time or those sort of buffs as well, you can get this off in an attack much faster to build up that frostbite, which is the main focus of using this, right? Like, say if you were using any of the, you know, the Carian Greatsword, for example, right? Like, it's essentially the same thing. It just doesn't do that frostbite buildup, which is the main reason why you would use this, to have that like pop of damage from the frostbite. Then you can switch to some other sorceries or what have you, but you've got those different options that you can do. Now, this is dropped by Glintstone Dragon Undula, located at the Cathedral of the Manus Celis, which is basically at the very end of Rani's questline. In order to do this, you'll have to essentially do Rani's entire questline, go all the way through the Lake of Rod and defeat Astel, etc., work your way up there, and then you'll be able to get Adulas Moonblade by defeating the dragon at the very top. Next, we have the Moon spells. Now, I'm going to talk about both of these here because Renala's Full Moon you can get significantly earlier in the game. Now, what this one does is it dispels all sorceries it touches, and it reduces the magic damage negation of those that attacks, right? And all these spells that we're talking about on this list, and essentially all intelligence builds, uses magic, so reducing their damage negation is fantastic. Rani's Dark Moon is the better version of that comes a bit later in the game. It does the same magic negation effect, but it also does frostbite buildup, which is fantastic, and you can buff this with the Carian Regal Scepter. You can buff both of these with that, actually, if you wanted to go that route as well. Now, Shannala's Rise is found in the Moonlight Altar area at the very end of Rani's questline, just like the previous one we mentioned on this list. There is a tower here that you will need to unlock the seal from by defeating the various turtles, and then at the top of that tower in a chest you will find Rani's Dark Moon. The very last one I have on this list for you is the Shard Spiral, which in a way you could say is like the new Comet Azure, if you want to talk about it that way. Now, as of patch 1.07, it did get its attack power significantly increased. Now, the benefit to this is not only that it does heat seek targets, it's that it will constantly hit enemies as it like rotates through them. So if you have a large enemy that this is actually going to hit, right, that's multiple hits that it's going to trigger as it like moves through them, through targets as well, like if you're hitting multiple things. Now, this takes a little bit longer to get. Now, you will need to complete Sorceress Celine's entire quest line and side with her at the very end, and then once you open up her menu to purchase things from her again, she will have this option for you to buy, and is a fantastic spell that you should absolutely grab from her once you have completed her quest line. But that is all the spells I have for you today. Let me know your favorite spell in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.